I think what I would like to do, picking up on some of the points that my co-panelists have already made, is to create a bit of a snapshot for where the debate on technology is. And in many ways, what I'm going to say reflects my own evolution as a business person, but also somebody who's grown up with who has a PhD in economics and therefore has sort of roots in public policy. What I'd like to do is to separate my comments into three parts. First of all, talk about the tension and the question of technology and the role of technology from a very public policy perspective, which many of you in this room will be familiar with. And then I'd like to talk about it, very quickly move through that and talk about what the role of technology is from the context of what I would call the mature boardroom. I happen to sit on the board of 4 companies, 3 of which are really grounded in what I'd call old school, mature businesses. And perhaps I can give you a little bit of an insight into the role of technology and the debate in that regard. And then I'd like to conclude by talking specifically about my 4th board, which is a technology company board, and perhaps imbue my comments and the comments in this conference with a perspective from technology and how they are seeing what the role of technology is, not just in creating economic growth, but more importantly, I would argue, for their role in creating jobs, and which is particularly important given the debate that we're having here. And of course, ultimately, what is the role of leadership? How do we have leaders that can make sure that we are able to imbue old technology and public policy with this debate? So let me first give you the snapshot around public policy, which I think is pretty well known. I myself was born and raised in Zambia, Southern Africa, and it is absolutely the case that technology has been transformational in virtually every sector. From healthcare, we're now able to deliver messages by text to people living in rural areas to say the doctor will be in your neighborhood in the next 2 weeks, to education, to be able to deliver education tools to people both in urban and rural areas. In finance, we're very familiar now with the whole discussion around money transfers, which now, according to the World Bank, is in the multiples of hundreds of billions. Without really any complication, you no longer have to go through going to Western Union to a bricks and mortar business. You can actually use the app on your phone to send money across borders. So virtually every area, transportation, telecommunications, has been positively impacted by the role of technology. However, at the same time, public policymakers, not just in developed markets, but also in developing markets, are quite concerned about what the implication for jobs this role of technology may be. Many of you in this room will be aware that the emerging markets is home to 90% of the world's population. The ILO estimates that there are about 100 million young people who are today out of work. That is between the ages of 18 and 25. Not only do 90% of the world's population live in the emerging markets, but 60 to 70% of the population is under the age of 25. In countries like Uganda, 50% of the population is under the age of 15. So being able to create jobs is absolutely a key piece of the story and how technology will unfold. Now, here is where I think public policy has an important role to contribute in the debate. Because ultimately, where the rubber meets the road, if you will, is about the skills gap. On the one hand, we realize and we hear from all manner of CEOs and managers of businesses that there is a dearth of employment. They are looking for candidates and people to fill these jobs. But on the other hand, as I just mentioned, organizations like the ILO and the very sort of now popular term in the UK, NEETs, no education, employment, or training, of which there are now 1 million in the United Kingdom. The young people who do not have education, employment, or training has now become the other part of this equation. So demand is absolutely there from businesses, but unfortunately we don't have the skill sets. So I think there is a real opportunity for the debate to improve. And as I said earlier, I don't want to spend too much time on the public policy role because I imagine this has already been picked on. But if you will permit me, I'd like to now shift very quickly to where the debate is from what I would call the mature corporate businesses. I sit on the boards of a large financial institution that is this year celebrating 325 years in existence. I also sit on the board of the second largest beer producer in the world, which is the largest beer producer in China. This is a business that is in over 70 countries around the world, but has a long history, nearly 100 years of producing beer. And I also sit on the board of the largest gold producer in the world, but also produces copper. Here we have three very different sectors: financial services, consumer goods, and natural resources, all of them in many different ways, whether it's from logistics or to the delivery of products to our customers, are very much grappling with the issue of technology. However, in the context of the boardroom, I would argue that the debate has been quite narrow and has been largely around the fact that technology can help either improve the top-line revenue, so growth of revenues, because as I said, we can deliver products, quality products to our customers faster, better, but also, on the other hand, it's about cost cutting, our ability to deliver those products at a much cheaper price point. This is essentially what the debate has been around, and on that basis, technology, again, has been viewed as a very positive opportunity. Nevertheless, increasingly, and because of discussions around how it is we're going to create economic growth and the role of technology in income inequality, which Gillian alluded to earlier, the debate is becoming much more sophisticated. Perhaps harking back to comments like of Henry Ford, we are concerned that if we continue to have these massive returns of capital and we don't care about employing people, what ultimately happens? Who do we sell these products to? That's a bit of a cynical view, but nevertheless one that is now becoming a big issue. So herein, I would argue, is an opportunity for business, particularly existing businesses, to talk to public policy on trying to marry these ideas and figure out what the role of business can be in job creation. I will not dwell on the whole range of issues, but I'm sure many of you will be familiar with that. Perhaps the more important thing, I would argue, is the question of the role of technology itself as a sector. And here I must confess, until very recently, I would argue that my view has been somewhat negative around what the role of technology has been, and I've already touched on some of these points. There has been a report, for example, from the Oxford St. Martins about 2 years ago, which was really a main touch point for the Jackson Hole Summit, which I attended in Wyoming with the Federal Reserve. The discussion was around 47% of jobs would cease to exist in the United States over the next 20 years. And I would argue that the debate in public policy and standard businesses, existing businesses, that has been the context of the debate. Up until the point at which I joined the technology company, as I mentioned, this would be my discourse. I would write those type of articles, and in fact, that would be my thinking, that technology was actually overall a negative piece to the coming story of economic growth and opportunity. However, I'm here to tell you today that if we don't have a clear understanding of what's happening in technology, and by that I mean reach over the Great Divide, which Gillian alluded to, the West Coast way of thinking, I believe we really are missing out on real opportunity to change the narrative, but also to see where the opportunities for technology can really emerge. One of my very close friends who's grown up in technology has constantly reminded me that just because we cannot see what technology is going to deliver in terms of job opportunity does not mean that technology will not deliver job opportunities. In fact, having sat in a technology boardroom, it's become clear to me that rather than produce products as a beer company or a bank may do, these technology companies are in the business of innovation. Every quarter they sit down and they come up with something new that you and I have never even thought about. And this is not wishful thinking. It's about pragmatism and understanding that the nature of those businesses mean that there will be opportunities, and we'll be picking up on some of the themes that my colleagues have already touched on, which is around the growth of the millennials, the attitude and the values of the millennials, things that we have not yet fully appreciated. So suffice it to say, I think in terms of imbuing our conversations in public policy, but also in standard businesses on how the world may evolve, we absolutely must bring in this debate and the perspective of the technology businesses. I think that we are doing ourselves a disservice. I think our understanding and our narrative around how businesses perform in different challenging circumstances is too narrow and does not actually adequately reflect this sort of boogeyman, if you will, and it's largely because we don't really understand what's going on. Let me leave you with the following point. I will not pretend to know how to imbue traditional organizations or indeed even public policy with that sort of technology X factor. It's clearly needed, and there's a real debate to be had for how we structure the boardroom, for example, with that sort of technology perspective. Do we want technology experts in the boardroom, or should they be advisors, et cetera? It's a big piece for debate, and it's something that I'm working on right now. But I think that is really where the more important question is, and rather than us sort of go into our own sort of cubbyholes and think that the world is coming to an end, I think that we should actually be quite optimistic that there are people who are working very hard and feverishly to come up with ways of marrying the opportunity of this wall of talent that's out there across the world that's looking for work with this world that we cannot yet perceive, but actually is very much like the arts. Just because it doesn't exist yet does not mean that it's not on its way. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here today, and I look forward to the rest of the conference.